Welcome to Holy Health, the podcast where cutting-edge health insights meet timeless biblical wisdom. Join us as we explore the latest in wellness, fitness, and mental health, all while grounding our journey in the spiritual truths and guidance found in the Torah. Whether you're looking to nourish your body, mind, or soul, we'll help you live a life of balance, vitality, and faith. Tune in to discover how to achieve holistic health through the perfect blend of modern science and ancient wisdom. Let's dive into the fullness of life, body, and spirit together. Hey guys, welcome back to the Holy Health Podcast. I'm really excited to bring you guys today's episode. We are going to be diving deep into the world of osteoporosis and bone health. This is a subject that I know many of my friends have been talking about, and many of my patients. I found it quite strange over the past few years when people that I'd known for years who are exercise teachers, so they've always been exercising, and isn't exercise the answer to what's going on with our bones? And I found it strange that some of these people were coming in and telling me they'd been diagnosed with osteopenia or early signs of osteoporosis, and I knew there had to be much more to what was going on than just exercise. So I started to look around, and I was really excited to find today's guest, Debi Robinson. Debi is a certified yoga therapist and expert in functional movement with over 20 years of expertise, helping people restore strength, mobility, and vitality. After being diagnosed with osteoporosis herself, Debi turned her personal journey into a powerful mission to empower others with natural, effective strategies for building stronger bones and aging with confidence. She now specializes in working with midlife and older adults, combining therapeutic yoga, lifestyle medicine, and holistic approaches to support optimal bone health. In this episode, Debi shares practical tools, science-backed insights, and inspiring advice on how to care for your bones. Whether you're looking to prevent bone loss or navigate life after a diagnosis, she offers a lot of practical tips. I will, of course, include all of her links in the show notes as well. And let's dive in. I can't wait to hear what you guys think. Hey everyone, so we are so lucky to have Debi Robinson here with us today. When I found her, as I often do, through listening to other people's podcasts, and I saw that she was an osteoporosis expert, and with all of this talk that we've been doing recently about menopause, you cannot talk about menopause without talking about osteoporosis. And I knew that she would be a wonderful person to bring on. So Debi, I'm so excited to have you here today.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you so much. Can we start out just by telling people what osteoporosis is, just for the people who may not know?
Yeah, so first of all, it's the number one disease in menopause. So yes, something we need to learn about. So up until about 30 or mid-30s, our bones are remodeling every day. They're building, dissolving. And up until about age 30, there's more building than breakdown. The breakdown is a cleaning up process, which needs to happen. So up until about our 30s, there's more buildup than breakdown. And then in our 30s, the breakdown starts to overweigh the buildup. And eventually, depending on where you go, you get a DEXA scan, it's called, to look at your bone density. And when you get to that negative 2.5 away from you at 30, that's when the disease of osteoporosis is given.
Okay, and how did you get here? Meaning you've become an expert, so I would guess that that's because there's a story there.
There's a story. In my early 40s in a yoga class, a yoga teacher tore my hip joint. He pushed me and tore my hip. So I had to learn about muscles, joints, and bones. Never, ever would have thought of that at all at that age. And I don't even know if I've heard of the term osteoporosis at this point. But eventually, 5 years later, I had to have a surgery to repair that injury, and that collapsed my joint. And then 17 months later, I had a total hip replacement. So I had a total hip replacement when I was 51 years old. But what happened around that age 50, after my first surgery, my hip joint collapsed. My body was broken. I was handicapped. I had a handicap placard. I couldn't walk more than 20 feet without being in pain. My whole world became small. I stopped living a super active life. And started living, really, I lost my life in many ways. And what I realized is how it went to the mental emotional layer. It wasn't just a physical injury for me. I used to think, wow, will my top of my leg just snap off? And if it does, where will I be? And who will help me? Will it hurt? Will someone pick me up? Will I be embarrassed? So I used to like visualize my bones as looking like honeycomb. I thought of them as weak. And then that actually did happen. Like after my hip replacement, I went to negative 2.4, which is 1 point away from that diagnosis of osteoporosis when I was 53.
So when you first had that hip injury, did they actually do a DEXA scan, and did you know that you were osteopenic or something?
No, you're using the word osteopenia now. So the word osteopenia is right before we come to osteoporosis. So once you start to have more bone loss occurring up until that negative 2.5, what's called osteopenia, which, believe it or not, about 55% of the women over age 50 are in that place. The way that we look at it, the gold standard in the world is a DEXA scan, which is an X-ray which looks at bone density, which is actually not an indicator of risk. It's ridiculous, and my mission is to completely blow this up and change the way we do things because we're doing it all wrong. So there's no baseline done typically in the States anyway. We don't usually test until about 65. That's when Medicare usually pays. So you don't know, quite often the women don't know until they have that disease osteoporosis. That's where I get a lot of them. So they weren't doing a baseline on me in my 40s. It wasn't even a thought to do that for me.
So when was it that you realized, when you were saying to yourself, is my hip going to snap or my bone's going to break? What was making you say that if you didn't even have a diagnosis that was close to osteoporosis? Like, what was making you have that thought in your head?
Because I had the injury, and when it was a torn labrum, and when I had the repair job for it, 4 months after that surgery, my hip collapsed. So now I'm walking and I'm feeling sharp pain in the front of my hip. And if I walked more than 20 feet, I would be inflamed and throbbing. At night, I would have to lay in bed, put my legs up the wall. So I physically had such a breakdown in my hip joint, I would feel it. So it was pretty much an all day, every day feeling or sensation that I had. And so that right there, so at 50 years old, that's me at 2016. Well, in 2015, 2014, I actually started teaching yoga at a hospital in Southern California. And I studied with a doctor, Dr. Lauren Fishman, who had a program called Yoga for Osteoporosis. So that was really kind of my first learning of bone health and exactly what all this meant and what it did. So I had a couple of things happening. I'm learning from him about osteoporosis, the statistics, which is crazy. It's just crazy when you like the potential of what can happen closer, like as we age, we're not even prepared. So I started learning about osteoporosis. I was teaching 8 classes a week to the 50 plus crowd, and people had spine issues and hip replacements and knee replacements and low back and shoulders. And so I had to educate myself on musculoskeletal issues. So I experientially was living in a broken body. I was working with people whose bodies were breaking down, and I was learning about osteoporosis. And so all of that together kind of started for me 213, 214, and that's what just got me to where I am, and that's my journey.
That's what I wanted to ask. So what turned things around for you was just starting that journey of working with that doctor?
Yeah, and honestly, when I started putting yoga for osteoporosis classes on the schedule for the hospital I was teaching at, I had 2 classes a week. Wow, they filled up. And so I saw this, I don't know if desperation is the right word, because I was only at this point 50 years old. So I didn't really have, and I did then actually have a baseline DEXA, although I don't know the results. I just know it was not enough for her to talk to me about. So I actually got to see, let's say the words desperation. I got to see the precariousness. I got to experience what women felt like when they had a diagnosis of especially osteoporosis and also of osteopenia. So that is really when it happened.
So you talked about, I think you said about 50% of people over the age of 50 starting with osteopenia. Why is it so common? Why does it seem to hit people? Is it more women than men? Is it both?
Okay, well, I'm just going to
Break that
sick.
apart.
I call it the bone loss lie. This is what all my webinars are on. So here's the thing. We called it osteoporosis till the 90s. In 1992, the orthopedic surgeons were at a conference in Rome and came up with this term called osteopenia. Osteoporosis means porous bones. Osteopenia means bone poverty. Now, 55 or 50% of the population over 50 could be in this range, right? Because let's face it, you're not 30 anymore. So those two terms and that criteria are somebody that's not 30 anymore. It's almost like we have wrinkles on the outside, right? I don't look the same way I did 20 years ago in my 30s. But so the wrinkles on the inside is bone loss, which is a natural thing. But here we go with a disease called osteoporosis, a medical term called osteopenia. And then we had this medication that was developed by a pharmaceutical company. And that pharmaceutical company, there was a company that had a machine called a DEXA scan. So the pharmaceutical company funded and supported the machine company. 1997, Medicare got approval for reimbursements to run this DEXA scan to look at bone density. Now doctors could buy machines, put it in their offices, test women. Most of them were going to be, especially if they're over 50, are going to be in the osteopenia or osteoporosis world. Well, here's this lovely pill that was created, which is really a terrible medication. And this medication became one of the first blockbuster drugs. So the misled, misguided aspect of in the bone health world for women, the disempowerment for us actually started in the 90s with big pharma, big healthcare. So that is how the whole shebang started.
Okay, so what do we do? So what would you tell women to do if the DEXA isn't a good indication? Is there something better, or should we just exercise the right way? Because I can actually tell you that I've been an exercise teacher for over 30 years, and I'm a physical therapist. And in the past 2 years, all of a sudden, 3 friends of mine who've been exercise teachers for many, many, many years, and they're very thin. I've never been like really thin, but they're really thin. All of a sudden came to me for physical therapy with this diagnosis of osteopenia going towards osteoporosis. And I was trying to explain to them, listen, there has to be something else besides weight-bearing exercise. You're doing it. What do you think? You're not lifting heavy enough weights? Like, you're already doing it, so there has to be something else going on.
I think we need to raise awareness to a couple of things. First of all, they're not 30 anymore, right? So they're not going to be at that 0 mark. They're going to be away from it. And so we are monitoring that with the DEXA scan. The thing about the DEXA scan, it looks at bone density. Bone density is not how we should be measuring fracture risk. What we really care about is, are our bones weak and are they going to fracture? We have to have the better quality bones, because those will not fracture or have less risk of fracture. So the DEXA scan gives us this reading, which actually we need to soften the blow on, and that's really what my messaging is. The smaller petite women, because the DEXA scan is an X-ray, smaller bones are going to be less dense. So smaller petite women are really the ones that are, I'm going to use the word misdiagnosed. Okay, misdiagnosed, misled, because that's it. The more education you have, that yes, you're not 30 anymore, but now we need to make sure that the quality of your bones is good. So yes, weight-bearing exercise. I love yoga because I have this body weight all the time, and I can move my limbs away from my body and increase the pressure in the muscles and in the bones. The thing about stronger, better quality bones is the muscle-bone relationship. So to have the better quality bones, we need stronger muscles, and that's what's going to happen with doing all the exercise. The other piece to this, though, the 2 top of the funnel ways to make the stronger, better quality, fracture-resistant bones is, one is weight bearing, so that's going to be the movement piece, and often, not just 3 days a week. For me, not just one time a week, 10 minutes, it's on a machine or machines or something. But then the other piece is what is happening inside. What is happening with your gut health, with inflammation? Here's another big thing that I am sharing and raising awareness to. Osteoporosis is an inflammatory disease. It is not a progressive degenerative disease, what we've been misled to believe, and that's because the DEXA scan is going to measure us away from 30. We're going to get worse. There's an average bone loss that's going to happen, just like there's collagen loss in my face in my 50s that's not as tight as it was in my 30s. So there is some bone loss that will naturally occur. So because osteoporosis is an inflammatory disease, we have to manage systemic inflammation. And most of the triggering of inflammation is in the gut, because 80% of our immune system is waiting to see what's coming in your mouth and will it get into the system in the way that it should, or do you potentially have leaky gut and a compromised barrier or fortress? So it's an inflammatory disease. Gut health or digestion, really digestion plays such a critical role there too. We have to eat the right foods, and then we have to be able to digest, absorb, and assimilate them and not bring in toxins or trigger inflammation. So that's the internal balance piece to bone health.
First of all, I love that, because it's like you're doing a commercial for everything we've ever talked about on this show, that the end of the day, it's inflammation, for everything. So that just fits in so well with everything else we've ever talked about on this show. So let me ask you, though, what about hormones? Do they play a part?
Yeah, and that's the thing. So that's why 5 to 7 years post-menopause is the greatest decrease of bone density, with the loss of the bone protective hormones like estrogen, testosterone. And so we want to, it's really about internal balance. So yes, we want to stop inflammation. Inflammation in the short run is necessary. Inflammation is protection. If that's how our body responds to protection. We need to, though, be able to turn that off and not constantly trigger that. So with hormones, we do lose our hormones. For those of us that are in menopause, gone through menopause, we have lost our hormones or are losing our hormones. So we need to have the lifestyle behaviors that are going to support whatever hormones we have. That's why I always say, like, whatever I have, I want to maximize it. And ironically, in the body, so before menopause, our ovaries is what makes our steroid sex hormones. But once we go through menopause, our ovaries no longer do this. Now it's the adrenal glands.
Right.
Well, the adrenal glands are our stress glands. They sit on top of the kidneys. The adrenal glands are either going to, it's an either or. They're either going to make cortisol, which is the stress hormone, or when we are in a relaxed parasympathetic state, they're going to make the steroid sex hormones, estrogen, testosterone, and all that. So we have to manage stress. At top of the funnel, we have to manage stress, because if we are in a stress state, we are turning off the switch on internal hormone production, and we're turning on the switch of cortisol, which is actually a bone dissolving hormone. It's catabolic. So that will actually break down bone tissue, because the bones are actually one of the first organ systems to respond to stress, and that's going to release the alkalizing minerals in the system. So hormones play a critical role, and now that we're raising awareness, and now that I'm raising awareness and completely blowing bone health up and redefining it globally, because it needs to be redefined, the DEXA scan, I want to take it with a grain of salt. I'm not saying not to do it, because the other technology, the ultrasound technology that is coming up, is not widespread yet. I want you to take your DEXA scan with a grain of salt. It's a density marker, which is not a fracture marker. Most fractures do not happen in osteoporosis. Most fractures happen in osteopenia or not real detectable low bone mass. So hormones in the functional medicine world, if you want to be natural, functional medicine world now, the prescription for bone health is not those disgusting medications that do more harm than good. It's actually BHRT, bioidentical hormone replacement. That's the number one preferred prescription. And we learned that in 2003, the Women's Health Initiative falsely, another misleading, misguided situation in 2003, we had a study, the Women's Health Initiative, that said that you would get increase of strokes and cancer. That was a flawed study, not peer-reviewed. They didn't use the right form of hormones or the right administration. They used synthetic progesterone and they used oral estrogen. So in 2023, which is 20 years later, we learned, we were wrong with that. So now hormone replacement, especially bioidentical BHRT, is really the preferred method. In my podcast, all the functional medicine physicians that I interview, that's their go-to.
So what about like vitamin D and calcium and things like that?
Yeah, so in the traditional approach to bone health,
Excuse me.
what they're doing is, medication, right? So that's like the thing, that's the tool in the toolbox. They're also promoting vitamin D and calcium. Now, calcium is really interesting. Calcium, we say here, I know in the States, that we need over age 50, we need 1,200 milligrams. That's wrong. And when you think you need 1,200 milligrams, the main way you're going to try to get that is in dairy. Dairy is inflammatory. So we actually don't want to eat dairy, not just for bone health, but for reducing inflammation systemically. So dairy is off the table. So now if you're trying to get 1,200 milligrams, that is a challenge. The number is probably closer to 700 or 800. And in the UK, that's their recommendation. And there have been studies done in New Zealand and Europe where they had two groups of women that they gave calcium supplements to, and women that were placebo, no calcium supplements. And what happened is the calcium supplement group had more heart attacks and deaths.
Wow.
So calcium is a hard mineral. It makes your teeth, makes your bones. And if it's in the bones, great. 99% of it is stored there. That's where we want it. But when you have this internal, when you've got inflammation and you've got imbalances internally, your bones are dissolving the calcium out of the bones to manage what it needs, because calcium is nature's Band-Aid, and it's going to come into the system for scar tissue, for protection. So I don't recommend supplementation for most of the ladies that I work with, unless I have some kind of functional lab that would indicate that they would need calcium. Vitamin D, I would say it's a hormone and a vitamin, and I would say that what we know now, and let me just say, what do we really know? Like whatever studies are being done, who funds them, how are they doing it? Are they following the supplement in your body? Do they see where it goes, how it gets delivered? When does it get to your bones? So I think we need to even think about how we do all that. So with vitamin D, I would say that most believe that the functional limit in your serum to be functional kind of would be over 50 or around 50 and above. Mm-hmm. So really having your blood tested, and then once you know your number, supplementing accordingly. Be careful you don't over supplement people on 5,000, 10,000 IUs, because excessive vitamin D supplementation will deplete magnesium. And magnesium is one of the four musketeers of bone health. And so you just asked about two of them. Calcium, number top of the funnel, right? We need that for bones. Vitamin D is what gets calcium absorbed. Magnesium puts calcium into the solution so it can be delivered to the bones by vitamin K. So you've got the four musketeers: D, vitamin D, calcium, magnesium, and vitamin K. So that is, yes, we probably need vitamin D, about 2,000, 2,500 IUs if you're in a good serum range, more if you need support there. Calcium, I don't recommend it. And you know what? When you start to pay attention, calcium is in everything. It is a structural mineral. Okay, black olives have 20 milligrams. Like, when would you ever think that black olives, a serving of black olives, has calcium?
Well, never.
Never.
Right.
So when you start to look at it, when you start to look at where calcium is, start looking at labels, you're going to find 40 milligrams here, 70 milligrams here. And if you get closer to the needing 700 to 800 mark, that's where you realize that's what you need, it's easier to get there than you think.
Okay, so what would be a sign for somebody? Let's just say if they haven't had a DEXA scan or an ultrasound or anything, are there some symptoms that somebody might see where maybe they should start suspecting that maybe their bones are becoming more brittle and maybe they should do something about it? Or should anybody over the age of 40 start supplementing hormones or certain minerals or things like that? Vitamins, minerals.
So from a general perspective, what would I recommend? Well, your bones after age 30 are breaking down more than they're building up. That's for all of us. That's why we see, especially high-level athletes, if you look at basketball and especially football, you see that the body can't really, it peaks by that time, right? If you look at quarterbacks, there's not very many playing in their late 30s, because it's just what happens to the physical package that we live in, our physical body. So there is a loss that's happening. You determine at what rate that happens. So when we ask about, if you're not doing a diagnostic, if you're not doing a DEXA scan, or the ultrasound is a better way to look at bone health, it's actually look at the microarchitecture or the quality inside. And the technology is called REMS, radio frequency echographic multispectrometry. So that's the ultrasound, a newer technology being pioneered by the orthopedic surgeons. That's who informs me, and that's when I partner with orthopedic surgeons that are really promoting this, because it looks at the microarchitecture or the quality of the bones. So that's the best way to look at your bone health. And if you didn't have that, and you're asking me like, how would we know? Well, they do. One of the big things is if you fall and have a fracture. And what I'm hearing more often now, and it doesn't have to be that you have a hip fracture or a spinal fracture. The wrist fracture, the number one fractured site on women over 65 is the wrist. So the wrist fracture, and then what I'm hearing is that when orthopedic surgeons are doing their surgery, if they see the bones, and I mean, come on, who gets a better view of bones than orthopedic surgeons, right?
Right.
So they'll tell the person, oh, you may have osteoporosis, go get a scan, depending on the person's age. Some of the ways, though, that doctors will potentially diagnose or suspect osteoporosis is if there's a loss of height, if someone has really poor posture, so it's called kyphosis, when your head is forward and your upper spine is rounded. And then there's a space between the lower ribs and the top of the pelvis. And if you put your hand in there, it's about a 4-finger distance between lower rib and top of pelvis. When that distance gets shorter, potentially there's a shortening of the spine between the heart and the belly button. This is thoracic spine, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, lumbar 1, 2. That space there is where most of the fractures occur. And they're called compression wedge fractures. They're in the front of the spine. And so if there's a shortening in this space, that's another way that physicians potentially either recommend diagnostics to get an idea, or I don't know if they would just diagnose from that without a DEXA. I think they'd have to have a DEXA.
Yes, I have a patient with severe kyphosis, and you could just see that she has had all these wedge fractures in her back. And you know, I tell people there's certain positions where they're not fixed, where you'll see you can change the position. But if you get to a certain point or a certain age, or you've gotten these, it becomes irreversible pretty much. And you definitely want to catch things before they get to that state.
Yeah,
so,
you know what's interesting about that? It's so interesting to me because I think about straws on a camel's back. And I think about that postural position, that the weight of the world on your shoulders, and not even knowing, like not being educated. That's a big thing for me. Posture is one of the things that I share the most. And I think that if I were going to give tips for somebody starting out, of course I'm going to say to manage inflammation, heal your gut, eat well, go on BHRT, do weight bearing exercise. I'm going to say all of that. But really the driver and the thing that overrides it all is the stress response. And so paying attention to the weight of the world on your shoulders and the way you're managing it, the way you're standing all day, the way you sit, the way you move. And I hate to think that it's irreversible, but what happens when the spine is off alignment like that is the calcium that we were speaking about dissolving out of your bones, that it's nature's Band-Aid, it's going to lay down more tissue. So scar tissue, bone spurs, osteophytes, all that development of real protection. And so if we raise our awareness to wait, what's going on in my life? And this can it can affect me in my structure. And so really that mental emotional layer has to be, I said that you have to eat right, you have to move, right? Those are two, that's musculoskeletal and that's biochemical, physiological. But that mental emotional area in our body that could be a stressor, that could be dissolving our bones, is the other like third main top of the funnel that needs to be addressed when it comes to supporting our bones.
Well, I'm in full agreement with you there. And I know for me, we talked about this off camera beforehand, you know, that as a physical therapist, it doesn't matter what somebody's coming in for. I'm teaching them about the stabilizing system because, you know, you could have a bad knee and the knee is never really the problem. I'm not going to go into that here. It's either the hip or the ankle. There's something else going on. But every single thing sits around the middle of you. So if you're not stable at the middle, and that doesn't mean I have to spend 4 weeks addressing this and then go on to that. No, you're going to address it all at the same time. But if you don't change the central stabilizing system, then, it's great to have a stable hip, but if it's not sitting on a stable center, how much good is that actually going to do for you? And when you learn how to really create stability, it changes your posture, it turns on your parasympathetic nervous system, it calms you down, and it helps stable. Like, you get all of these fantastic things. And as you know from yoga, we talked a lot about your interest in yoga and what you're doing with yoga, that when you breathe well, as you pointed out, with 80% of your immune system being in your gut, one of the only ways to get that lymph in your gut moving is through diaphragmatic breathing. So you get this added benefit that will help you, I guess, long-term with osteoporosis as well, helping control inflammation and moving the lymph system. So I'm just you saw I was sitting here nodding my head to everything you were saying, because I totally, agree with everything you're saying. And I think breathing changes the world, changes everything. So
it does. It's really interesting. So 50% of our lymphatic vessels or nodes are in the abdominal area, which is why, and the diaphragm being right in the half part of our body, lining our whole lower rib cage, when that presses down into the abdomen, especially if you close your eyes and you really focus on it, you could feel that intra-abdominal pressure, right? Everything is so tightly bound. You're kind of gently massaging and moving. And lymph is actually one of the ways that we transport our hormones, our fat-soluble hormones. So when we want to support hormones, whether we're on BHRT or whether we are just trying to manage what we have, the breath or the management of that is going to play such a critical role there. And one of the simple postures in yoga, now let me say, with osteoporosis, forward flexion in the spine is the biggest no-no. So it's not forward folding, because we could forward fold at our hip joint, which is what we need to learn how to do to stay safe. So if you're in your 50s, you don't know where you are yet, you're doing weight-bearing exercise, you're talking about how important trunk stability is, because that's going to help with spinal health. The other important thing is to, make sure that you have your postural aspect, make sure that you have your structural aspect, but make sure you learn how to bend, and you learn how to bend in your hip. And so especially when you're heavy lifting and you start to focus on lower body muscles, and you're doing, because the studies show that the stronger lower body is better for healthy aging and better for bone health, for fall and fracture prevention. So really importantly, we learn how to bend in your hip. And one of the postures that we do in yoga is, people know about child's pose, which is a flexed spine. And when you have osteoporosis or even osteopenia and you're being more cautious with that spinal flexion, one of the ways you can do this is to be on your back on the ground. And you bring one knee into your chest and pull it in and hold it deep. And if you breathe into that thigh with your belly, you're creating more of that lymphatic supportive movement. It's called Apanasana. So you either do one at a time or both. And when I was in India studying, that's actually it supports digestion, not just though physical digestion of the food in your gut, but mental, emotional digestion as well. So it's a digestion support, and digestion is one of the top of the funnel things we need to support when it comes to bone health, because you need the building blocks of the tissue. It's not about just eating. It's, am I digesting it? Am I absorbing it? And am I assimilating it into my body to get to my bones?
Can we just sort of concisely give people the things that they need to be focusing on in terms of preventing or helping reduce the incidence of osteoporosis, just so that we sort of sum it up so that people get this clear picture?
Yeah. So we need to reduce inflammation. That's a really important thing. We need to support digestion, and we need to support our gut. So the things with food, you've got to give up, at least do an elimination diet for 90 days. You got to give up gluten, sugar, and dairy, top of the funnel. Give up coffee or limit caffeine, because caffeine is dehydrating and it's acidic, and alcohol, because you're going to affect your detoxification system if you drink alcohol. One beverage actually wipes out all the glutathione production, which is the most abundant molecule in the body. So I always say top of the funnel. I don't know if that maybe I
That's okay. No. I got what you were saying. So,
So you've got to eliminate triggers of inflammation. That would be the food, and instead bring in bone supportive, gut supportive foods. So that would be 75 plus grams of protein a day, 30 plus grams of fiber, because fiber is probably one of the best things we could do to support our gut, so that we have bone building bacteria and we don't have an overgrowth of inflammatory triggering bacteria. Digestion, support digestion, so whether that's digestive enzymes or eat in peace. If you're not in a state of peace when you eat, your body won't digest. So you have to be in a state of peace. You've got to chew your food. My teacher in India said, drink your solids. So you have to chew so much that when it goes into your mouth, it's pre-digested. So not bringing in inflammatory triggering things, supporting digestive behaviors. Don't drink liquids with your meals because you'll dilute your gastric juices and you need to digest. Manage your thoughts. Check yourself before you wreck yourself. So really stress management, going outside, seeing the sun, taking breaks, and then do weight-bearing exercise to develop stronger muscles. And that could be plank, and that could be squats, and that could be push-ups, and do some single leg balance, whether that's tree pose or bring your leg forward. So you keep that flexibility, range of motion, communication in your feet, your ankles, your legs, your hips. So yeah, I would say that those are probably the things I'm going to say. And it might seem like a lot, but really there is like a top 10 things to do. And you have to also optimize sleep. So all of the things that you're going to be doing to make menopause more manageable are going to be the things that you're going to do to support your bones to be the strongest fracture resistant bones that you could have. And we do the best we can do.
Okay, well, I think that was great, and I think that would be very helpful for people. And do you have any story maybe from someone that you've worked with where you saw like a huge change in them, where they came in? I mean, I guess you're a prime example. Your story is wonderful as well. But is there anyone that maybe you've worked with that you saw like a huge change with them?
Yeah, there's a couple. But yeah, my story, I went to negative 2.4 on a DEXA, and then 2 years of having really major lifestyle shifts and focus to 1.9. So it was pretty significant. So I'm going to say that this is what stands out for me, because women reverse, they stop, slow down, and or reverse bone loss because they
that's
can.
Great.
And that's a shift in our mindset as well. That's a whole paradigm shift in addition to all the other paradigm shifting I'm doing. So one woman diagnosed at 70 with osteoporosis, doctor recommended medication, took it for 2 months, horrible symptoms, came to me, I ran functional labs on her. And this is a person that really struggled with gut symptoms. And 3 months into her protocol, she no longer had any symptoms. At her 2-year checkup with her DEXA scan, she actually reversed osteoporosis. She no longer had osteoporosis. So she should have, in 2 years, have been getting less bone density because of her aging. Yet she actually went the opposite way. So she stopped it and reversed it, and even reversed the term osteoporosis. And her doctor said, I don't know what you're doing, but whatever it is, keep doing it. So that's one person. Another person that really stands out for me is the lifestyle shifts this person has made. She never cooked for herself. She didn't really work out much, didn't pay attention to her bones in that way. I call her a rock star. Her name is Mary, because she actually completely adopted a stronger bones lifestyle. She totally did. So she cooks for herself. She removed what needed removed, added what she needed added. I actually ran labs on her. We did a stool lab for gut health. She completely followed everything. She has not had her 2-year DEXA yet, but she did go get a REMS, and her REMS indicated that she had really good quality bones and a lower fracture risk. But just the lifestyle shift and how supportive she is of sharing this story with others, she really stands out to me because she shows what's possible.
Can you tell me exactly what it is that you do? People come to you already being diagnosed either with osteoporosis, osteopenia, knowing that they need to. What do you call yourself?
A functional bone health expert. And
Okay.
I call myself that because a doctor called me that. I said to her, I'm a bone health expert. Can I call myself that? She goes, no, I think bone health expert is for doctors. She's an endocrinologist. She goes, I would call you a functional bone health expert. I'm like, ooh, I like that better. So I'm a functional health coach. I run functional labs. I do blood to look at food sensitivities, stool to look at gut health, saliva to look at hormone, liver function, to look for yeast through urine and mold. So I do functional lab analysis, and I've done that for years with women with osteoporosis, which has given me this depth of knowledge. But I still do run labs. My main thing is I have a very low cost, inexpensive community that is called Stronger Bones Lifestyle. And I go in there daily and I share like clean cookware and what are the best supplements. And I interview experts. I put extra podcast pieces in there, or we have challenges in there, or we have a discussion on a different topic that might be controversial, or we are very curious about it. So I have that. That's my, low ticket, come in there and get lots of information. Tomorrow, there's an orthopedic surgeon that'll be with us for an hour and a half Q&A. So, and I do a lot with orthopedic surgeons. So that's that. Then I have a program called Healthy Gut, Healthy Bones that I think doing online courses without a expert is real. People don't do them. I think you really need an expert. And remember, I got here because a guy tore my hip when I was 44. So I think that the people you're working with, you have to vet them and you have to make sure that they are the expert. So Healthy Gut, Healthy Bones, I have a program to help uncover these root causes of bone loss and to look at triggers of inflammation.
Wow, it's impressive, and it's really important. I've said this before, but it's sort of like, excuse me, when you were young and you were pregnant, you looked around and everybody around you was pregnant. All of a sudden you see all these pregnant people. And now, I'm 56 and you're looking around and everybody's coming in with these different complaints and these different things. And you see how they're all really age-related, degeneration, inflammation, lifestyle, all of these things that, really catching up with people, that I hope that people in the younger generation, like your kids, my kids, that they'll learn from us. I mean, usually everyone has to go through their own things. They don't want to learn from you. They want to try things themselves. But I hope that the next generation will learn to make certain changes so that they can age better,
Well, I think it's happening because I am on 2 summits and they're on the perimenopause. So I'm trying to really raise awareness. Bone loss starts in your 30s. So I'm really raising that awareness. And you said something, that word lifestyle. The other thing that I do is I have a podcast, Stronger Bones Lifestyle. And I called it that because what I realized with all the years of all that I've done, teaching yoga, I'm a yoga therapist. I don't think I mentioned that. I teach live classes 5 a week, and it keeps me strong and healthy and all of that. I love doing that for those that I work with and teach. But then I also have a podcast, Stronger Bones Lifestyle, and I called it Stronger Bones Lifestyle. My community is called Stronger Bones Lifestyle because it is a lifestyle, and it's a lifestyle in what you're doing as well, right? You're raising awareness. You said now your peers have to learn the lifestyle to support hormones, to reduce stress, to deal with all these lovely things that start to happen when we go through menopause.
Exactly. Because I don't know, I feel like everybody has a choice in life, right? You can choose, do you want to, I've heard this expression before from someone, do you want to live or do you want to be alive, right? I want to live because there are so many people you look at who are in their 80s and 90s, but they can't get out of a chair, And again, everybody has the choice to live their life the way they want. And I just feel like trying to help support people and give people the knowledge to hopefully be able to age in a way that is better, that will, allow them to live and live well, is really important.
So important because I broke at 50. So I feel like I ran ahead. And I've worked with thousands of people since 2010 teaching yoga. And I teach to the 50 plus crowd. So I see the breakdown, the shoulders, the knees, the hips, the spine, the feet, bunions, collapsed arches, plantar fasciitis, all of it. I've seen all of this breakdown. And you know what? It hurts. It's painful. And you can't live when you're like that. Like I wasn't living, I was alive, realizing what it felt like to not be able to live. And so I feel like I ran ahead, not that I wanted to, I was forced there. My body broke, and I see the pain and suffering with those that are breaking down. And I'm like, oh, heck no. And then I got my life back. I mean, on the 6-month anniversary of my hip replacement, I was in India climbing up a mountain. Wow. And I just said to my doctor, he goes, what do you want? Like, what do you hope to get from this hip replacement? I said, can I just walk again? All I'm going to ask for, I'm not going to be greedy, but if I could ask for one more thing, it would be hiking. And here I was on this mountain. And now if you see me, I take people on wellness journeys to Scotland, to Bali. I stand on that leg. I do crazy stuff. I am living. And so that's what I say is I experienced it, and oh, heck no, not on my watch. Are you doing this? So we're raising awareness, and education is queen.
I love that. So let me ask you, what does spirituality mean to you?
So we are spiritual beings. I think that there's more to us that is unseen than seen. So the physical body that we see and the roles that we play, mother, daughter, wife, neighbor, we play those roles. But the depth of who we are is so much bigger than what we see. So whether we call that our soul, the life energy that is in me, that is in you, that is in the world, to me, that is spirituality. Spirituality is respecting life energy and doing my best in this lifetime to be good to others, to be kind, to learn what I can. And because I love yoga and I'm a yoga therapist, they say that we all have what's called a dharma. We have a reason, in French it would be raison d'être, right? So we all have a reason or a purpose. And so when we can honor that, we're living at our high vibration of spirit.
I love that. I think that's so important, and I really love that. So where can people find you? I know you mentioned your podcast. I'm going to link everything for people. What are the best places for people to find you, to connect?
Debi Robinson, DEBI, Robinson.com is my website with a lot on there. My YouTube channel, Debi Robinson Wellness. My Instagram is Debi Robinson Wellness. Podcast, Stronger Bones Lifestyle Podcast. But if you go to my website, you're going to see all that on there too. So, yeah.
Okay, great. Well, I'm going to link everything for people. I want to thank you so much. This has been such an interesting conversation. I know people are going to get a lot out of this episode. And thank you. Hey everyone, welcome back. I have with me here today Edan Green. I'm sure you guys remember her. She's been on with us several times before, but Edan is currently finishing her degree in education. She's working as a teacher, and she is a brilliant Torah educator with a great future ahead of her. And I love, she always comes up with some of the most interesting Torah extras for us, and I have no doubt that she's going to wow me and all of you with what she has for us this time. I know that osteoporosis is a very interesting topic. It's gone along with all of this theme of, menopause that we've been delving into. And Edan, I'm thankful to have you on. It's Erev Shabbat here. We're literally like about an hour before Shabbat, but this is when it worked for us. So here we are.
Thank you so much, Dara. Oh my gosh, for just putting this all together always, and also for your flexibility. I'm very grateful to be on here. It's so fascinating. I say this almost every single time, but I think it's worth noting that I've always learned so much from the podcast, and it's such a zechut because I don't know that I would be exposed to it otherwise, really, about all these different medical, studies, phenomena, developments, all these things, realities that are being revealed, and I think that in and of itself is, prophetic, where certain knowledge is coming forward and certain discoveries are being made, and we're just learning more about ourselves, and that's the incredible part of revealing the divine design and everything. So it's equally spiritual as it is medical, and I really appreciate that. So just some ideas that came from hearing about this, about osteoporosis, about essentially the bones, And I'm a big language geek. I love learning, especially through language. We know that Hashem created the world through dibur, through speech. And so really, if words and letters are the framework of reality, then we really have to study them and immerse ourselves within them. And so I thought, okay, what's the Hebrew word for bones? And it's atzamot. That's the word for bones. And it's such a loaded word. There's so much to dive into. So let's just break it down together. How atzamot, the shoresh, the root word of that is ayin tzadi mem, which is etzem. And etzem actually can be understood as the essence, right? What is a person? Their structure. Literally, I feel it in my bones as I feel it within every part of who I am, the fiber of my being. So we understand that there's a certain identity found in the body and the structure in which we're built. So how we discover that actually discovering the physical part also understands the spiritual. And we know this always, that the physical is a reflection of the spiritual. We know that there are Gemaras and there's Midrashim that what happens in the heavens is reflected on the earth. And so we understand that as what happens in the physical body is a reflection of some esoteric spiritual expression. And so understanding that the atzamot is the essence, that our bones connect to the essence of who we are. And so how they express themselves or how they can heal themselves is very powerful. And I was thinking about this actually very unfortunately, but I think that it's a very powerful Jewish identity question. We had Yom Ha'atzmaut recently. And that's also, Atzmaut is our independence, our essence, our individual and collective identity was formed through the entire soil of Eretz Yisrael being filled with the footsteps of Am Yisrael. And understanding, though, that we had this crazy transition. Every year we have this, but this year was extra crazy. We have Yom HaZikaron, the sun sets, and it becomes Yom Ha'atzmaut. And this year specifically in Israel, there were fires that were set by the enemies that live here, and unfortunately, and it to me was kind of this wake-up call. Already we've been waking up, but this, right? I don't need to tell you, like you know. But this wake-up call that there are people that exist in the world that want to burn the bridge between zikaron, which is the memory, the mind, the expansiveness of thought, and literally stopping that bridge from the body, where we have these esoteric big things that we were saying before. The spiritual is always trying to express itself in the physical, and our enemies are trying to burn that bridge. They're trying to say, no. Your spiritual and thought and memory experience is different from the reality you live today. But we know that we were commanded to not forget, right? To definitely always remember that there's a certain history that repeats itself, and we as an identity, a Jewish atzmaut, our atzamot, are literally screaming to us, remember that there's a link between our zichronot, our memories, and our life today. And we also understand this through one of the names for Rosh Hashanah, for the head of the year, when we learn everything, and our whole year is mapped out. Literally, the bone structure of the year is Yom HaZikaron, the day of remembering. And Hashem remembering us through. So when our enemies were trying to burn this bridge, it's up to us to remind ourselves and remember that they're internally and forever linked. And that's the atzamot.
First of all, I think you're right, meaning etzem, atzma, we do know that any time word has the same root, it means that the words are connected. So that's brilliant. Like, I know that bone is etzem, but I never put it together with atzmaut. So that was really a brilliant way to put it together. And you're right, we are always supposed to remember. I think exactly as you're saying, because history has a way of repeating itself. And I've, said since the beginning of October 7th that, sometimes Hashem keeps giving you the same message because you're not remembering and you're not doing anything different, right? What do we say? Insanity is doing the same thing again and again. And as long as we are not going to learn, it seems we may unfortunately have to keep getting that same message again and again. But I love how you put those two together, because even though I know the words, I never really put them together, but it was a really, really strong, very great connection. Thank you for that.
Thank you. B'simcha, mamash. It's a zechut to be able to think like this. And just, if I could add one more idea. Thank you so much of exactly that. Like, okay, so what is this? What are the bones? How do we understand them? What is this atzmaut? What is this link? And, I'm appreciative that I was able to share this with you, but this is not my chidush. This is the chidush of the Nevi'im, of the Chachamim, and understanding that this is a message, again, like you said so beautifully, it's been carried on generation through generation. And so we know specifically in Yechezkel, the Navi, there is this prophecy of the valley of dry bones. And it's a very intense, metaphoric, and very physical representation of the identity of Am Yisrael. And he's looking over this field in Israel of these dry bones, and it's essentially Am Yisrael. It's the Jewish identity dried up, totally lifeless, right, and dormant, living in the land. And he looks to Hashem and he says, what is this, Am Yisrael? Is this what's going to be? And from that is born this beautiful prophecy. Also through the bones, Hashem says, no, I'm going to come and I'm going to revive these bones. Tchiyat Amitim, through the physical, spiritual, and emotional identity of Am Yisrael, I'm going to revive them, and they're going to flourish and live and love this land. And I think, Bezrat Hashem, we're seeing it now when our bones are literally waking us up. They're being revived by physically being here, physically understanding that our reality is totally linked. Mind, spirit, body, everything is linked specifically with Am Yisrael to Eretz Yisrael, and understanding that we're finally bridging that gap. And please God, from that should be the most greatest of revelations of the self collectively, individually as well as Hashem. And so that I guess also just if I could give a bracha to myself and to you and to everybody listening is that we know that our atzmaut and our we should know our atzmaut in our atzamot, right? We should know our identity in our bones. Just as we know, okay, I have a head, I have arms and a femur bone and knees and elbows, all the parts that make me who I am, that also my Jewish and spiritual identity is also just as clear.
First of all, you gave me the chills. You're right, because what are dry bones? That's really what we could say osteoporosis actually is, right? It's like the bones are drying out. So hopefully, because we know so much more now, if we can link the spiritual world with the physical world, right? As people start to age and the bones start to dry up, we're learning now how to revive them. What are these things? What did Debi teach us? What are these things that we need to do to revive our bones? And as our bones revive, exactly as you said, we should have the zchut to know what to do, to feel in our bones the path that we should be taking moving forward. And that's just in everything, not just here in Israel, but with everything in our lives.
Amen.
So I really love that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This podcast is for informational purposes only. Please seek guidance from a trusted healthcare professional. By listening to this podcast, you release Holy Health and all of its guests from all liability. I'd like to thank Yakir Abelo for editing this podcast.